With that, Jesse, let me tell you what. Let's just do it because I know you've kind of got to go going a little bit early tonight. Not early, but you've got to get going. But are you ready for rapid fire?
I've been waiting for rapid fire all day.
All right. Well, let's just jump in and kind of keep with the physicality theme a little bit. Marcus Freeman talking about his defensive line, loves that defensive line. Here's what he had to say about it.
They take after their coach. I mean, Wash that's a passionate dude, man. And he's a lot of fun to coach with. I remember when we first coached together at Cincinnati, I had known Al from my days in college, but to coach with him, he is an energy provider. He's a great football coach, but an energy provider. And so when we had the chance to hire him, it was without hesitation that I wanted him a part of our staff. And I think what you see is that our D-line is reflecting their position coach. And it's a huge credit to him and what he's done with that room, the passion, the effort, the fundamentals that they play with. I wish I could take credit for it, but he's done a really good job with that room. And you got some young guys that haven't played a lot that are performing well, and Jason Anye and Gabe Rubio and some of those guys. Donnie Heinisch, I told him, I said, you're reminding me of another 41 that played here when I was the defensive coordinator. I mean, he's showing up, and it's been really good to see.
So this is my question, Jess. Coming into training camp, defensive line was one of the bigger question marks on this team. Where we are right now, about a week and a half to go until the season opener, do you feel more concerned with the offensive line or with the defensive line?
You know what? I am actually going to say I have more comfort with the defensive line just because of the overall experience that is more prevalent along the defensive line. And then to be honest with you too, the defensive line, and this is why I like, kind of how this is, we've seen this trend more so what seems like the last 5 years to a decade is, the defensive line is that hockey style kind of line shifts, right? Like you can get fresh bodies in there. And if someone's maybe having a bad series or a bad day or, whatever it might be, there's more of an opportunity to kind of rotate someone in that can maybe step up or give the guy who's struggling a little bit of a breather. When you look at the offensive line, there's a lot of inexperience at the guard positions, guys who have never had actual starts at the guard position. And then you throw in the fact that Zeke Correll is not 100% right now. And what if a backup center does have to play? Now you're looking at your two guards and center, a three-man rotation that has basically zero starts in meaningful games at their career at Notre Dame. So I like the depth along the defensive line, and I like that the experience and how much kind of further along they seem to be than the offensive line.
This defensive line is just playing like gangbusters. So the confidence level is really high in them, and it is. Do you have to take some of the grain of salt? Yeah, but because of the limited live action that we've gotten to see. But in each snippet of live action we've been able to see during training camp, defensive line has looked really good, and the depth is really good. And he mentioned some of the names there. Guys like Jason Anye, who's been tearing it up going back into the spring, and all these guys across the board. I think people are going to have a lot of fun watching this defensive line this season. How deep is the concern with the offensive line? Again, it's hard to gauge. Is the defensive line that good? Is the offensive line still just figuring things out because of the fact that they've been rotating some guys in and there is some inexperience in there? It's a good question. And I think just because it's Navy in week one, it's a little bit more concerning when you look at what's going to happen with Zeke Correll. And like Michael says, I tend to agree with what Michael's saying. He says he thinks Zeke's going to be okay. We'll sit out this week, and hopefully next week he's around 100%. Even if he's not 100%, if he's 90, 95%, I think that should be good enough. John brings up a good point. Are we going to pretend Zeke was good at picking up those blitzes last year when he was playing with two very experienced guards? No, but remember,
but that experience last year is going to make it this year so much more easier.
Right. That's exactly right. And he does look like an improved center, what we've seen from him in trade. And that's what a full season of experience is supposed to get you, right? He's supposed to be better at that now, and he is better at that now.
Yeah, and he's supposed to take his
you can say he had issues, but he's got a heck of a lot more experience than Ashton Craig potentially coming in behind him if Ashton Craig is thrown into the fire. Go ahead.
Yeah, he takes those, lumps and bruises last year as kind of the inexperienced guy, so he can be the experienced guy this year and help those guys, those younger guys that are, kind of in the shoes that he was last year, help them along, and just, really be the leader. You don't gain. There's nothing more important than experience itself, and I think that's definitely the case with Corral. I think he's going to have a much improved season. I do agree that I don't think I wouldn't put too many eggs in the basket of concern right now of whether or not he's going to play. I would just say more so that you got to be prepared that he's not going to play, right? Like you got to be prepared for that. And so the fact that, that someone else is getting those reps in and he's doing the things, the steps necessary to quickly kind of, recover from whatever he's got going on. All of that is optimistic, but it only takes one tweak against a team as disciplined and physical as Navy. So you just got to be ready. You got to be comfortable for, whoever goes down, that someone can step in and be ready.
You spend this week at the very least getting Ashton Craig ready to go, prepping him as much as possible in case he is needed next week. And then if Corral is ready to go, he's ready to go. And then, there's still going to be some different question marks that are going to come with it, but we can't sweat them all, I guess, right now. So Marcus Freeman also talked about his young receivers. He loves these young receivers, and Jaden Greathouse and Rico Flores Jr. specifically.
You got to expect to see Jaden Greathouse and Rico Flores both play for us this year. I don't consider Tobias a young guy, even though he's only going into his second year here. But those two young guys, I would see having to help us immediately, and they've shown the ability to do so in practice. Braylon James has had a good camp, but we'll see how that progresses with Braylon. But I really think we'll see Greathouse and Flores.
I found it interesting, just the choice of words, and you can always read too much into anything, I guess. But he says Greathouse and Flores will have to help them. What does that say to you?
I think what that says to me is they had kind of a plan A, and I think plan A was giving some of those, older guys with some more experience a shot at it first.
Some opportunities. Yeah.
And the fact that we haven't, and this is just an example, one example, the fact that, Colson wasn't with,
you're still thinking basketball. Deion
Colsey. Sorry, I got them all mixed up there, but Deion Colsey not getting a real shot, when you guys saw them first and second string out there, I think kind of speaks to why Flores and Greathouse are going to get their opportunity. And it also shows that they need guys to be playmakers at the wide receiver position. And I think those guys are more dynamic and can provide some of those bigger play opportunities. I think when they want Sam Hartman to step up and throw, they want him to throw with a purpose, right? Like they want that potential for a big play. And I think you have a better opportunity with that, with guys like Greathouse and Flores on the field, maybe compared to some guys who haven't capitalized on the situation as much as they should have.
These guys came from good programs. They were highly rated wide receivers. We saw what the wide receiver room looked like last year. Didn't always get a lot of help from the quarterback position, regardless of who the quarterback was. They're going to get a lot of help from it this year. But these guys obviously enrolled early in the spring, and they showed themselves in the spring, and they have continued that into the fall. And just where the receivers room was, and I agree with what you're saying, other veterans have had opportunities, whether it's Colsey or whoever you want to talk about.
And they just haven't stepped up
to be made there. That's right. Vince and I talked about him a little bit yesterday. I just don't think, I still see Colsey at the very least in a role similar to what he had last year, being that possession guy, a guy who can come in and maybe, make a big catch for you on third down and potentially move the sticks and that kind of thing. But I just don't see him being a volume guy right now. And both of these guys, Greathouse and Flores, they've been really impressive for freshmen. Like, this isn't just like you see a highlight here, a highlight there, and then people say, well, they were highly rated. Why aren't they playing? They're going to play because they've been making plays since they stepped foot on campus back in the spring, and it didn't stop during training camp. The ability's there, and I think that they're going to have every opportunity to show it this season. So it's pretty exciting when you think about it, because, again, when you think about all these seasons where why isn't the freshman, this talented freshman out there, we're going to see him this year.
And I thought of something while you were giving your input there. I think another thing that it very blatantly shows, now that I think about it even a little bit more, is I think Marcus Freeman cannot waste the opportunity of Sam Hartman. You don't bring in a Sam Hartman type quarterback, a guy who is opening up your passing game, and then not allowing him to open up the passing game. Do you get what I'm kind of saying by that? Like, you can't go out and get Sam Hartman and, all the, not controversy, but, kind of what came out of that, quarterbacks transferring, etc. And you can't go out and get him for one season and then not use him to his full potential, right? Like,
and then tie his hands behind his back because you've got a couple freshmen. You need the guys who can go out there and make plays and help him out. Yeah,
exactly. So it doesn't matter who it is at this point. Sam Hartman needs the bodies to throw to someone if you're going to go out and get the quarterback that Sam Hartman is.
Yeah, and I think that I think that he has aided in the progress of these guys as well. Having a quarterback who can throw consistently to these guys rather than quarterbacks who are a little bit hesitant, still trying to figure things out, all these different things. Ryan Roberts and Salty Virginia Peanuts might have to wrestle over who's the biggest Jaden Greathouse fan.
I was gonna say that is Salty's probably number one prize title right now is number one Greathouse fan.
Michael jumping in late, I believe. He says everyone's worried about the wide receivers. Let's talk about what happens to Zeke Elliott. If something happens to Zeke Elliott center, who's the backup center? Well, again, Ashton Craig was running with the number one offense at practice today with Zeke out. So it's looking like that's who it would be if Zeke can't go. But I'm pretty confident that that he will be able to go next week. And Ryan says that he's going to be cracking the peanut pretty
for that
soon.
top spot.
That's right. Ryan is pretty good at the trash talking. Speaking of trash talking, the Irish, they've been pretty talkative during training camp this year. And so the head coach, Marcus Freeman, was asked just how he feels about some of that trash talking that's been going on.
We definitely encourage competitive spirit, and we want to have energetic practices, and we want our guys to provide energy. When it becomes a distraction, that's when we got to make sure we cut it out. And there have been times in camp, like any camp you go to, that it's crossed the line, and we got to make sure at that point we address it. And I don't want to pull back that competitive spirit that they have, but I want to make sure that we understand there's a certain level that we can get it to, and we can't cross that line. And that's it's a fine line because we're going to push them to that edge. We're going to push them to right there where we want you to play with that energy that truly I believe it takes to have success. But what you can't do is hurt your team, and we got to make sure we always correct it when we get to that point.
So what do you think, Jess? You good with it?
Oh, yeah. I am a big proponent of trash talking and competitiveness. And, well, it's just because, again, going back to these guys are lining up across each other every day for, 3 to 4 weeks. Like, you got to do stuff. You get tired of seeing the same guys. So naturally you're going to, it's going to get more chippy, more competitive. And I think that stuff, competitiveness, is what drives more productive practices. It allows,
Really?
these,
Okay.
yeah, because I just think that when the intensity cranks up, and that kind of stuff cranks up, as long as it's not leading to negative results and it's breeding, again, more productivity and you're getting the best out of these guys, it's getting them to go harder. It's getting them to practice harder. The more you practice hard, the more you are prepared for the game. So I think it's something that kind of naturally flows. I think the only time it becomes an issue is when guys, you just don't want guys actually getting into physical fights. I think that's where,
Right.
because that can
And we
be
haven't seen
detrimental.
any of that. Yeah. When we've been around
Yeah.
anyway. Yeah.
Right. And so I just think that that's where you start to kind of maybe, you don't want to create not clicks, but when those fight things start happening, it's kind of, it's getting out of line. And again, you don't want that kind of behavior to transpire over into games and lead to, stupid penalties or whatever it might be. So you got to nip that stuff kind of as soon as possible.
Yeah. Tanner says if you've ever played the game, there's a lot of talking. I mean, there's obviously a lot of talking going on. But the point is, these practices have been like, especially when we're there during live stuff. Like, I think it was last week we played the Jason Anye stuff when he was chirping, like he was getting in Rocco Spindler's face and some of that. This year's team, there is definitely a lot more spirited conversation going on at different points than we've seen in recent years. And as Marcus Freeman was saying, they have to know where the line is. They have to know where the line is drawn once it gets to game time. Because, in a practice, it's not going to matter. It's a practice. You're chirping at your, guys on your team. You might get them a little bit ticked off at you, but kind of like what you were saying there, Jess, you hope that it brings out the competitiveness in each other and it kind of ramps things up a bit. What you get worried about, Pat McAfee likes to talk about the old whites, right? If you've ever heard the Pat McAfee show, the old whites, the old white men. There's a lot of old whites out there with yellow flags on Saturdays. That's, again, knowing where that line is so those old whites don't pull out the yellow hankies and start throwing them. That's what you get worried about if you go past that line on Saturdays.
Yeah, another point to kind of add to it, to me, is like that stuff in practice. To me, it builds that bond a little bit stronger, as crazy as it sounds, because you get into points where that your teammates have your back, and that it means that much more. Because, like, think about it, you're not talking trash and getting competitive if it doesn't mean something to you, right? Like, who goes out and trash talks, again, something that isn't super meaningful. I think when you have guys trash talking and getting into it, it shows to me that people have also bought in to the process, right? Like, they want to get good, they want they want to be successful because it leads to more team success, and etc. So I again, as long as it doesn't lead to anything that would lead to fighting or a 15-yard penalty, I'm all for that stuff. And I'm glad. Yeah. I'm honestly glad to kind of hear that it's going on.
Facilitate Inform says they throw flags for trash talk. Yes. And as Ryan countered with, it's called taunting. And all it takes is one official who decides maybe he's heard too much or, whatever, he hears the wrong word, even if it's not directed at him. All it takes is one guy, and then all of a sudden it's a 15-yard penalty. John says trash talking is for professional wrestling. But again, you've been out there on the field enough to know, Jess, it goes on all the time. It's just a matter of to what level it goes to. And, can you keep it under control so that your team is not put in a bad spot? Joe was asking the question, where is the new media deal? Joe, I think you answered your own question. Media expires in 16 months. He followed up with, think about Under Armour. Under Armour has less than a year to go at this point. It was just done. So after this season, and it's not 16 months, I don't believe, because after basically there are 2 seasons, this season and next season left on the media deal, the NBC contract. So there are 2 seasons left. So I would anticipate that probably somewhere around a year from now is when we're going to hear. That's typically when these deals are done / get announced is with about a year to go, just like with the Under Armour deal. There was about a year to go on the Under Armour deal. We just got an Under Armour announcement from Under Armour. We haven't heard it from Notre Dame's side, but from Under Armour. So that's when I would expect that it gets it. Could get announced sooner, considering you've got all the NBC connections with the new athletic director and all that. I don't know, but we'll see. I said I feel like you always, if you're Notre Dame, you want to be in a position of bargaining power, but at the same time, it feels like all this other stuff has kind of calmed down because Florida State was out there chirping and everything else. They have passed the point where if they wanted to go to a different conference next year, I believe today was the deadline for them to announce that intention. That's not going to happen. So it feels like the SEC is fully content with where they are. What happens with the Big Ten? But I don't think that there is a ton of other money that is going to be exchanging hands. So that's just kind of how what it feels like, that Notre Dame is the last big TV contract that is going to be done. But as Ryan says, it's 2023 and anything is possible. That is exactly right. That is exactly right. Fill in the blank. It's blank that Ohio State head coach Ryan Day says he wishes somebody had really emerged at quarterback between Kyle McCord and Devin Brown by now during their training camp, but he is not yet ready to name a starter.
It is great news that Ohio State is still deciding who their starter would be, because what that means is there is no clear-cut guy head and shoulders above everyone else. So what that means to me is it likely sounds like you have two average to above average quarterbacks. I don't think that they have that elite guy that Ryan Day is accustomed to having, ever since he's been at Notre Dame. So, yeah, it's concerning for Ohio State, but it's great news for the rest of college football because I would be happy to see Ohio State have a down year at quarterback for once, right? Like it seems like all like this entire, 2000 from 2000 to 2023, it doesn't seem like they've had a bad quarterback, and that's a luxury to have. And so I just think that's great news because it sounds like both guys are just about average and no one's really stepping up and being that elite quarterback that they're used to having.
Yeah. Derek says, what if they're both elite? Can they both be really that elite?
That's what I mean. I feel like you don't have this issue. You don't come out and say this if you have two elite quarterbacks battling it out. I think it's more
your
so.
Your answer is going to be different. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like both these guys are great. I'm having such a hard time, figuring out I could go with both of them. But when it's saying like, I can't really decide between the two, it's like, I just think that they're more average than.
I mean, I agree with what you're saying. Ohio State has just had an embarrassment of riches when it comes to the quarterback position, just passing the, it's like USC football used to be until basically until Pete Carroll left, you passing the baton, one Heisman winner or, one Heisman contender to another. I'm speaking more Heisman winners with USC, but, with Ohio State, all these guys drafted at the top of the draft. So it is 5 weeks from now that Notre Dame and Ohio State play at Notre Dame Stadium. And the fact that Notre Dame has a quarterback like Sam Hartman ready to go, but Ohio State is having trouble figuring things out between these two guys, I think that it is great news for both Notre Dame and for the big, the rest of the Big Ten and for college football.
The college football community.
Yeah, if maybe think about it. Ohio State and Alabama could both have major quarterback issues this season. Wouldn't that be good for everybody if that's how it actually plays out?
Like, when's the last time that one of them, let alone both of them, had this same issue in the same season? I'm going to go out and say it's been a long time.
Yes, exactly right. College football writer Brett McMurphy says the Big Ten should add Stanford in everything except football, and that Stanford football should play as an independent or in a group of 5 conference. Then maybe the Big Ten could add them in the future, while the rest of their sports, the Olympic sports, would play in the Big Ten. Do you buy or sell any of this?
this is just a big circus of an answer for what Stanford should do. And to be quite honest with you, I for the majority, am not that I dislike Brett McMurphy. I'm indifferent on him and
Right.
what he does, but it's just that's such a homer Big Ten take to say, oh well, Stanford should do this, and then maybe the Big Ten will consider adding Stanford after they've proven their worthiness to the rest of us. Like, come on, man. Like that's just such a stupid answer, in my opinion. Why is Stanford just gonna, linger around for a couple of years, maybe try this or that out? And it's like to them, it's an open audition to come join the Big Ten or something like that. It's a very Big Ten answer to me, because the Big Ten just thinks so highly of themselves and that they're this great football conference. But it's like you're so top heavy. It's just you're two teams every year, and your conference is decided literally by one game. So it's a big sell for me. And again, it's just a big circus of an answer, in my opinion.
Huge sell. There just is no demand for Stanford in anything. Why would it be even good for the Big Ten to add all of Stanford's Olympic sports, but not football? Why would you bring in the those programs don't even generate revenue for Stanford, let alone bringing them into Big Ten venues across the country? The women's basketball program is elite, and there are obviously some good programs. I'm not knocking the programs at Stanford. There just is not any demand for any of them. There is no TV demand. There is no monetary demand. I mean, if anything, I think women's basketball could make its way as an independent because of Tara Vanderveer and what that program is. They're just and the baseball team just went to the College World Series once again as well. They're always good, but even they have a hard time in terms of generating attendance and interest.
Well, don't they have a hard time hosting super regionals, even when they're one of the better baseball teams in the country?
Because of the venue. Yeah, that's exactly right. So there's just unfortunately no demand for Stanford, and I don't think that there's an easy solution to what Stanford should. I think the best case scenario that I saw was them and Cal and the other teams, the other two, Oregon State and Washington State, just join up with the American Conference if that's what the American wants to do, because there just is there's just not a lot of demand for them. That's the reason that they're out there on their own right now on that island. I guess they're not completely on their own. They do have Cal out there, but Cal is in even worse shape than them. Jerry Rice has proposed a quote-unquote upper room for the Pro Football Hall of Fame to distinguish the elite Hall of Famers from everyone else. Do you buy or sell it?
I chuckle when I read this question. This is another big time sell for me. And it's kind of, I really don't like this at all, hearing that Jerry Rice said this, actually, because to me, Hall of Fame is the Hall of Fame. Once you're in, right? There's no more tiers after that. That's the greatest tier that you can get to. Everything below that is kind of like, maybe you're in your team's Ring of Honor. Maybe your jersey was retired by your team, but you didn't quite make it, to the College Football Hall of Fame, or maybe you're in the NFL Hall of Fame, but maybe you're in the College Football Hall of Fame, but you didn't quite make the NFL Hall of Fame. I just think there's tiers to it already, and that the Pro Football Hall of Fame is the greatest tier you can get into. And if Jerry Rice really has that big of a concern, he needs to bring it up with the people who are determining who gets into the NFL Hall of Fame or not. Yeah. Once you're in, you're in. There's no more tiers to it at all. So it's a big time sell for me. I think it's very selfish of him to come out and say something like this ultimately, because he just wants to distinguish himself from Jerry people Rice. Even more.
That's Jerry Rice. The ego is large. I think that is pretty obvious. You're in the Hall of Fame. You are the greatest wide receiver of all time. What else do you need people to say about you?
That's what I mean.
Why do you need another level? You're either in the Hall of Fame or you're not, because just what you said, the tier is the Hall of Fame. That's the tier. You're either in or you're out. You get the gold jacket in the ring and the bust, or you don't get the gold jacket in the ring and the bust. That's what it is. Make it harder to get into the Hall of Fame if that's what you're so worried about. And it is very hard to get into the Hall of Fame. It's like Chuck Howley got into the Hall of Fame last week. And unfortunately, Chuck Howley probably does not have, and I'm being very serious and sincere about this as a Cowboys fan, Chuck Howley does not probably have a lot of cognition about even being in the Hall of Fame at this point. That's the real shame, that a great player, it took him 50 years after he retired. Now he's in the Hall of Fame.
Can't even enjoy
His
it.
family can enjoy it, but Chuck Howley unfortunately can't. Don Coryell has since passed away. It meant a lot to his daughter. If you saw his daughter's acceptance speech, like, why do you have to have tears after? There's no reason to. Just make it. The cutoff is getting into the Hall of Fame. Like on the baseball side, Harold Baines getting in a couple of years ago. Tony La Russa pushing the case for Harold Baines. It's a shame that this has to fall on Harold Baines, but he has no place being in the Hall of Fame. And now it lowers the bar for other, so people can say, well, if Harold Baines can be in the Hall of Fame, X should be in the Hall of Fame. That's what it is. It's the lowering of the bar to get into these different Hall of Fames that people need to look harder at.
Yeah, it seems like Jerry Rice wants his number freaking
retired.
Yeah, it's like he wants it retired across all of NFL, it seems like. It's just like, I don't know. It's such a selfish answer. And again, it's the Hall of Fame is the greatest tier you can get to. That's the last tier. There should be no more tiers after that.
Yes.
Yeah, I want to see Jerry Jones' list of who he thinks, Jerry Rice's list of who he thinks belongs in that top tier, I guess. That would be funny.
Yeah, let's see Jerry Rice's cutoff. And then, I'm sure that there's going to be a lot of 49ers in that room, but let's see Jerry's cutoff. And then let's see who he thinks is, slumming at the next level below him. Like who should be in the room with Jerry Rice? Let's see that list, and then let's talk about it. Fill in the blank. It's blank that Zeke Elliott has signed with the Patriots.
I almost took yesterday off of work. It's sad that Ezekiel Elliott will be wearing a Patriots uniform. The Cowboys drafted him. I thought Ezekiel Elliott was going to be a career Dallas Cowboy. And I know that, running backs rarely get, second big contracts with the team, but Jerry Jones paid up. He loved him some Ezekiel Elliott. And I thought at that point that Ezekiel Elliott's, running back life would only be with the Cowboys. So it is going to be very sad to see him in a different uniform because him and Dak came in together. That was the duo. He had really great seasons. And unfortunately, all those hits and mileages on his legs add up. And I don't blame the Cowboys for not bringing him back. Like, it is what it is. It made sense logically. But it's still sad to see. And it was actually funny. I follow Ezekiel Elliott on Instagram, and he posted on his story, he got rid of all of the hair and he went down to a clean cut again. And I was like, I wonder why he's doing that. Like he went back to a very clean cut. He changed his number to 15, like he back again, like he wore at Ohio State. So yeah, it all makes sense, I guess, is what it means. Like, is what I'm saying now. He's going to a clean cut organization of the Patriots. And I hope he has an impact. I think he still has some good usage in him, whatever his role might be. But at the end of the day, it's still sad. I wanted him to be a Cowboy for life.
You're very sentimental. You love Zeke Elliott. I wish that he could have continued the production that he had early in his career.
Right.
He is kind of like exhibit A when it comes to paying running backs and why nobody pays the running backs now after having that early success in their career. Ryan, you're pushing getting blocked right now. If this was the Patriots of 8 years ago, maybe, I'd feel a little bit more trepidation about it. But I just feel like this is like they have a need organizationally. They're in a lot different place than they were, 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago. I think it's going to be a lot harder for Zeke Elliott to go in there and have a lot of success. I do think that he can be a nice goal line type running back for him, short yardage type running back for him. Unfortunately,
also he's the
burst and
blocker.
explosion left him the last few years. Yeah, and he is a good blocker as well. That's true.
And Max protects situations where a team, maybe it's 3rd and long and a team's going to bring a 5-man stunt. Like Ezekiel Elliott is one of the best running backs at picking up blocks throughout the NFL. So there's definitely a role for him, right? He's just not going to be that premier 1st and 2nd down explosive running back anymore. He's more of that kind of grinder, physical, and not afraid to stick his nose in the pass protection game.
Yeah, it is just crazy. Like thinking about, like when you were You can probably throw Ryan into this as well. Like when you guys were young pups, like 15 years ago or so, 15 probably to 18 years ago, like running backs still mattered. They were still a big part of your plans as a football team. That has just all changed so much within the last.
There's always
8 to 10
someone
years.
younger, faster, more explosive, and most importantly, much cheaper in terms of what running backs are going to want in that second contract. So me personally, if I was a GM and I was running a team, quite honestly, I don't think a running back would ever get a second deal in my eyes, again, because you can always draft someone that's just as fast, just as explosive, and again, much cheaper, right? And if you are as good as an organization as you think you are, you should be able to develop those younger running backs kind of, cycle after cycle.
Chi-Town, fullbacks still mattered 2 decades ago. Yeah. Excuse me. Now fullbacks are called tight ends, basically, right? Or like H-backs.
Yeah, because I was just getting ready to say most tight ends duel as a H-back, That's like the whole Ravens offense, basically.
There hasn't been a Barry Sanders since Barry Sanders. And that's like, you really, like, when was the last real electric running back in the NFL? Like Zeke was fairly electric his first couple of years, but that went away pretty quickly. Like Reggie White was obviously electric in college. It didn't necessarily translate.
Maybe Jonathan Taylor's
NFL.
first year.
Yeah. Adrian Peterson to an extent early in his career, I think. Jonathan Taylor is a good one, actually. Just what he did his first couple years. But look at where he is. Yep, Mr. 2.0. I agree with the Adrian Peterson. That's for sure. Jamal Lewis. That's true. I mean, there have been some, but it's been like a 1 or 2 year thing, and then you just don't see him anymore. I guess that's the whole point of the thing. All right, we're going to go ahead and wrap it up with that tonight. Appreciate you being here. As always, let's take a time out, or not take a time out. I'm going back to the radio days. Let's take a time out, and we're coming back with some good stuff coming at you. We're going to wrap it up. Hit the like button on your way out. Of course, subscribe, rate, and review. Have a good one, and we will talk to you mañana on IB Nation Sports Talk.